All right, well, welcome back, and there's still Good Morning Nigeria reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As we said, we are continuing our conversation today on nation building and the role of the political class. Just before we go ahead with this second segment, let's have a recap of the contributions made by our guests yesterday.
Nation building is a deliberate project of creating one single national identity out of several nationalities or out of several ethnicities. And the notion of nation building, if you check the literature in political science, is it's an idea that has been developed in the context of countries largely that were previously colonized, and in which the colonial project brought under one political territory different groups of people who had nothing to do with themselves.
We are multi-religious, and many of us cannot forget to be, the religion they follow. I will not forget, the ethnic group I come from. I will not also forget the community where I come from. But the fundamental issue is that not forgetting that does not mean that, I will not be loyal to the, to the national identity. The national ethos that we are talking about must be imbibed, but, the historical Nigeria, up till today is that we have somehow found ourselves where the politicians, even during the military, they manipulate the religion, manipulate ethnicity for their own selfish ends. But I think in practice, we need to find out why are we self-centered, as political, leaders of this country.
As people, we're diverse. Now, do we see ourselves as one? Do we still see ourselves as coming from what we used to be before we became independent? These are things that I think should form the context of even a nation and its building. For one, after the before the independence, there used to be leaders. How did they perceive the country to be? Now, when they exited, how do we now as leaders see ourselves and see our nation?
But I believe that nation building is all about the leaders coming together to have and postulate economic policies that will drive the nation forward. And if that is anything to go by, I just want to share from the last speaker's ideas and postulation that we have really not done well in nation building. The forefathers or post-colonial leaders did so much for us, and then I think we left it from there. The country called Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned now, is just in the name.
Well, and in the part 2 of our conversation on the subject matter, our guests of yesterday have all returned to be part of us, apart from our guests from Ibadan, whom we're going to introduce much later. But presently, we have in the studio Senator Abubakar Yusuf, a senator representing Taraba Central Senatorial District in the Nigerian Senate. Distinguished Senator, welcome again to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
And we also have here in the studio Honorable O.C. Chinedu. Of course, we're expecting to have O.C. Chinedu very shortly because, of course, has indicated that he's going to be part of the program. Kinsley.
All right. And by the way, yesterday, Honorable Prestige was late for the commencement, so it's just as well that he's not immediately available now. He will join us in the course of the conversation. Let's, at this time, welcome Professor of Political Science, Professor Sam Ego. Prof, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers.
Okay. And let's also welcome Honorable Abdullahi Adamu Candido, Executive Chairman, AMAC. AMAC stands for Abuja Municipal Area Council of the Federal Capital Territory. Candido, pleasure to have you with us.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, and joining us from our Ibadan studio is Professor Emmanuel Remi Ayede, Professor of Political Institutions, Governance and Public Policy, University of Ibadan. Good to have you on the program, Professor.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
We We are certainly going to start with you. What is your perspective of nation building? What does it connote, in your opinion? And I'd like you to relate that to the Nigerian situation.
I think nation building is a very important aspect of developing a country, and what is usually involved is trying to harness the strength of the diversity of a country and glue the various ethnic groups in such country into a unified force to unleash development. Usually, we look at diversity as if it's a problem, but usually diversity is supposed to be a strength. And one of the mistakes we often make in Nigeria is to problematize diversity in such a way that we always look at it from the viewpoint of tolerance and accommodation, whereas it can be a positive force for building a strong country, recognizing the fact that our diversity offers us a lot of opportunities in terms of resources, in terms of diverse perspectives, in terms of the different identities and ceremonies and festivals and all other things that come with having a large group of people coming together under one roof. And it's important for us to also make the point that that we are brought together under colonial rule by force is not a cause for anxiety, neither is it something unique in terms of how states are formed worldwide. Usually we say that the state is established by force but governed by authority. What we mean is that most states of the world are actually created through conquest, through war, and so on and so forth. But that over the course of time, the visionary leadership who see the possibility, great possibilities of such a society, bring in policies, bring in initiatives, and all kinds of programs that will enable people to begin to cohere into some form of coherent society that can work and collaborate towards achieving common purposes. And that's how great countries are established across the world.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Ayede. Of course, we'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. And just before we began the discussion this morning, we of course introduced our guests and indicated that Honorable Osi Chinedu Prestige will be joining us just like he did yesterday, coming in a few minutes. He needed to sort out one or two things. We're not going to give him the opportunity to tell us why he's also late this morning. But Honorable Prestige, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay. All right. So let's come back to our guests right here in the Abuja studio. A number of points were highlighted yesterday. Some of them, of course, relating to the values that appertain to what we refer to as nation building. Others also touched on the conduct of members of the political class and what the issues are. Some persons will say, okay, the values represent the software of nation building, and that the hardware will be the public goods, in other words, that are delivered as a result of governance. What Professor Ayede was talking about, governing with authority, what you then produce as a result of what you're doing. But let's come back again and ask ourselves this question. What is it with the Nigerian political class that creates some dissonance, as it were, between their conduct, their aspirations, and the ends of nation building? Professor Samegu.
Yeah. Well, I think one is historical, and the other one has to do with the present interests that they have. When I talk about the historical, and look at the colonial history of this country, and then you look at the whole historical patterns of orientation that the elites acquired under colonial rule. Now, the British came, conquered this vast territory. In fact, I like Calmet, who refers to Lord Lugard as the most successful freelance imperialist that you can think of. Conquered the whole area. And the question of governing this territory became a problem. And the British had to do a lot of experiments. Our amalgamation that was supposed to unite, yet they kept the territory separate. A clear strategy of divide and rule. Then much later, the British would then look at the ethnic configuration in terms of creating provinces. Much later, regions. So by the time we were preparing for independence, the ethnic cum-regional framework of political competition had been developed. So political parties were ethnic and regional in nature. And there was an understanding among the competing nationalists. Remember, this is one country where there was no one single political movement, that fought for independence. They fought as regional entities. So NPC was Northern. Action Group was West. NCNC, that was originally national, was forced to become regional, because of the experience of Zeke and so on. So by the time we moved into independence, it was a competition of three equal, regional, heavyweights that were negotiating for how to, have a national platform, but retain their regional and ethnic political, framework of organization. So this framework was very important. And to remove this framework became a problem. And that was why, for us, even though we became federal, we couldn't just find that common formula. The first generation, Awo, Zeke, and others, were very brilliant in terms of how they understood this, preserving their regional and ethnic political base, and then finding some form of accommodation, at the national level. Now, the second one is present. Once the British disappeared and they took over, their own interests, to take over power and to advance their own material agenda became more important. And that was the approach, So all the reforms in our federal system, for example, we need our own region, we need our own state, everything had been informed by the need to create, enclaves for these elites, to be able to control power and, do so. For me, this history is important and the interest they have, and that is why the point made by Ayede is very important. The problem is not difference. Differences are there. Every country, will have to deal with it. But once those who are in power begin to politicize the difference, and then create a sense that there's nothing to do in common, that is where the problem is. So I think we need to recognize our history from colonial rule, the orientation our elites acquired, and how that orientation also became very important for them in advancing their material interests. Instead of developing the nation, instead of creating production, instead of ensuring equity in access to opportunities, and instead of creating those values that can unify us, values of good governance, values of justice, values of equity, values of patriotism. That is how I would like to see it.
Yeah, Prof, it's quite interesting that you raised the historical perspective to this. But Nigeria is a nation that has experienced so many political activities, upheavals, even one culminated into a civil war. Yeah. So we have learned a lot of lessons from that historical point of view, because after the war, there was this feeling of national unity in the country. When Biafra, was the war, of course, we said no victor, no vanquished. But we now came with the Second Republic at a point, which of course had parties that had national outlook. Some had national outlook. Some are still had regional bias, like UPN, for instance, MPP. Right. Then we have the MPN, which was then what we term as a national party because of its spread and so on. So have the political class not learnt enough from that historical perspective as to have a kind of, or develop a kind of value system that will necessitate nation building? And I'd like Candido to come in here, because your contribution yesterday really tailored to the fact that the political class should be blamed for Nigerians not having that patriotic feeling, the zeal of a patriotism that can establish us as a one united nation without all these ethnic bias and religious bias.
Thank you very much. I think let me once again speak just the way I did yesterday. Nationalism is something that is inborn. You see, people like Zik, Awolowo, Sardauna, and Tafawa, these are nationalists to the core. Yes, they came from the angle of regional leadership, sort of. Sardauna was representing the interests of the north. Zik was representing the interests of the east. Right? Awolowo was also representing the interests of the west. But put that aside, they still champion the cause of Nigeria's independence. They put behind the mentality of their regions, their people first. They brought the country first as one entity. Okay? And therefore, for me, I see that as a beginning. And the present crop of political leaders ought to have, learned from that, those lessons that they read in history and they saw actually in these 3 or 4 personalities. Unfortunately, it is not what we are seeing today. Now, look at it this way. If the political class are to be blamed, which I also share in that mentality, but the citizenry ought also to be blamed. Do you know reasons? Reasons are simply because it is the Nigerian citizens that make the political class to be what they are. Instead of them being the kings, they tend to make the political class to be the kings. Okay, and if you are made a leader and you become a king, then you monopolize the people. You don't do the best for the nation. For instance, let me give an instance. I chair only a local council here. On daily basis, if you see the kind of crowd that besiege the secretariat, they are not there on a national calling. They are there to encourage me to be a thief. They are only there to ask me for what should I give them. And if I don't give, even if I provide whatever number of services as dividends of democracy, they don't see it as anything. So they don't plant patriotism in the mind of the political leader. And therefore, if you don't give them what they want, and you are thinking of the next 4 years, or thinking of another election, you just have to do their bidding by ensuring that it is either you accumulate what does not belong to you to give them back so that you get back to the office. You understand? This kind of mentality is also eroding national feelings, and therefore the growth and development of this nation cannot be achieved in that manner. I want to encourage, like I said yesterday, it is not the number of people. We need governance is all about participatory. I made an instance of somebody who is asking for a lesser member of House of Representatives, a lesser number in the Senate. I said that is not even the way. What is most important is to cut down the amount of welfareism. You call it salary or privilege or allowance or whatever. Cut it down and make the offices unattractive. You can bring as well as 100 senators from one state. It doesn't matter. All it requires is that let the people be properly represented, but with little or nothing to induce them to begin to ask for office. Okay. So for me, that is how I look at it, and I think patriotism should be very, very much encouraged in the nation.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Candido. Let's bring in our distinguished Senator Abubakar Yusuf. On the issue of the retreat into our respective enclaves, and therefore the ethnic identities, religious identities that we have, some observers would then ask the question, despite the fact, given the historical examples outlined by Professor Sam Egu, that we use the ethnic platform we use the sub-identity rather than the national identity for our politics. By the time you go to the sub-parts, you find that we are still where we are, an undeveloped country or a developing country with a great deal of tension arising from our station in the Committee of Nations. We normally make the comparison with those countries that we were at par with more than 50 years ago. What then is amiss? That despite the fact that, fine, we play political class now, we play on the various identities, but at the end of the day, the public goods that are supposed to be delivered to these same identities that are exploited are not on the table for all to see. What's amiss?
Well, thank you very much. Let me start with the quotation of General Murtala Muhammad of blessed memory when he created states. He said, the more states we create, the more we highlight the problems of minorities. The only safeguard against that is to learn to live together as Nigerians. First of all, let us believe we are Nigerians. I think that is also an issue. Many of us think that we are not Nigerians. We are rather, enclaves. Rather, minorities, minority nationalities rather than Nigerians. I don't know if what the professor said, the colonization was, a big area that, that they couldn't be able to manage. But there is disconnect between the rulers and the followers. And the reason being that we have believed in our enclaves, the Kabiyesi syndrome. And a subject believes that Kabiyesi is everything for him. All of a sudden, there is somebody that is called Prime Minister. There's somebody that is called Premier. There's somebody that is called Head of State. There's somebody that is called this and that and that. So his allegiance really is not to that Premier, to Prime Minister, to Head of State, to President, but to the one immediate person that he can see, he can live with. So it is the trickling of that ethos from the top to say that, look, the Kabiyesi is important, we are also important, but Kabiyesi cannot work in a vacuum, in isolation. He has to work with the Emir of Kano, he has to work with the Sheikh of Borno, he has to work with the Sultan of Sokoto, he has to work with, the Obi of Onitsha, something like that. So, connecting these, which are the fabric of our development, because that's what the colonial rule used, divide and rule. So now the division, we have to understand that division is not working for us. And it has actually created more problems, against the nation building. But like production is a function of what I call generosity. There are leaders that are not generous, there are leaders that are generous. And generosity stems from the fact that the zeal to do the best we can do for our people and not what we can do for ourselves. Again, to go back to the little history that we know, Sir Ahmadu Bello died virtually a pauper. Tafawa Balewa died a pauper. Zik, I don't think he was, as at then, he was, such a rich person. Awolo and the rest of them. So these people are great personalities that overcome the institutional development. So everybody sees Sir Ahmadu Bello rather than northern Nigeria. They see Zik rather than eastern Nigeria. They see Awolo rather than western Nigeria. So it is the ability to put these forces together and then, put delivery to the goods. Awolo did a lot by free education. Up till now, he's been cherished for that. Sir Ahmadu Bello did a lot by being a symbol of northern unity, because Sir Ahmadu Bello worked with almost everybody, every aspect of the community. So in my own understanding of this, leaders have to be generous, leaders have to behave like a hard man, he would rather, have his cows, have good pasture, good water, and then he stays with hunger. So until we leaders decide to deny ourselves, what we think, is important to us, but what is not, what is more important to the society rather than what is important to us. I think that is the way I think we leaders can be able to deliver the goods and services, and then begin to have the feeling for the citizens that, look, we have a leader who we can rally around, and then who we can, appreciate, and then build us together to link us with other sectors of the country.
Yes, gentlemen, historically speaking, if you look at how other nations, got to where they are today, those that were at par with Nigeria some 50 years ago, as Kingsley rightly pointed out, there is this situation that is so clear in Nigeria, that the deliverables are not there. Is it infrastructure? Is it education? Is it transportation? There are non-deliverance of the goods and services for the Nigerian people. That is number one. But where I'm going, I want to bring in our friend, Honorable Prestige, is that your submissions yesterday aptly described the value orientation of the political class in this country. But gentlemen, we have had causes to sit down and talk. We've had conferences that brought together Nigerians from every part of this country. The latest was that of 2014. And we also have a Constitution of Nigeria put together by Nigerians from different walks of life, from different regions of this country. And what we articulated, we are geared towards ensuring the continuity of this nation, unity of the nation, and overall nation building. Now, but what we have seen is that they have not resulted into any meaningful development. If you have to check the number of years we have been as a nation, 59 years now. And political class, if you like it, whether you like it or not, plays a key role. In fact, the number one role, because it makes policies, it implements policies, it represents the people, right? And what we get at last is that, look, after all said and done, we have not moved an inch. Honorable Prestige, what's amiss? Let me use Kingsley's word.
Thank you very much. I think let's also go back to what I said yesterday. The political class is to be blamed wholly. There is no country that has ever developed without having a dedicated and selfless political class. If you go to countries like, let me go to Asia, you see the leaders. The number one law is about corruption. Any leader that is corrupt can never have anything to do with public office. In China, in fact, it attracts more or less a death sentence. In some of these countries, they make corruption one area that once you infringe on that, you will not have anything to do again in public life. But here in Nigeria, I think we have not done enough. We are still very far. The political class has not given enough to the people whom they represent. And let me also say this, and I keep saying it at every forum that I find myself. How do we even elect our leaders? What is the electoral process that produces these leaders? How are they selected? From the political parties, what they call primaries and all that, how do they emerge? Who brings them up? How do they emerge as representatives of the parties? During the elections, how do they emerge as winners? I've seen this is the only country where you can beat your chest and say this is the person this person must not go. You see people betting that this one will not go, he will not go, because either he is not part of them or he is not with them. So in that case, whoever they want is the person that will go. So our electoral system is flawed. It's totally flawed. And until we have an electoral system where credible leaders will be elected, this country cannot move forward. I want to say this. I'm a politician, and I've had few elections. And I've seen that as we speak now, some people even who knows that they never even made 1/10 of the total vote cast, are either in the court trying to bring down somebody or trying to see how they can bribe their way into office. A case in point was some time ago in the National Assembly where we had a particular issue that we were discussing. Some people walked out to go and make calls to find out what position they would want to take, what position they would like them to take. And those people walked out, came back, and took that position. Some would not even have anything to contribute other than what their godfathers say. So the issue of godfatherism is another issue that will never give us the best in terms of our leaders. So as we speak, I want to say this. I'm sorry to those that will feel bad, that the issue of godfatherism is a problem. Nigerians have not yet elected their leaders. Most of us who are there in National Assembly as members or governors, we are not the people's choice. And until we get this right, so we need to look at how we elect our leaders. As we speak, it is totally nothing to write home about. Leaders, those who call themselves the political class, are those chosen by a few people, a few wealthy people who even raise the money from our system. They make the money from our system, not from their businesses or whatever. But they now use the money to impose people who do not have any focus, any idea of what governance should be. In other clans, you can't get into any public office without, first of all, looking at your integrity. Your integrity it comes first. Your past comes first. What have you been doing before you want us to elect you into this office? They will look at you, x-ray you. And then, but now, we don't look at that. What we do is that this is the person that I have anointed. And once you are anointed by a group of people, you become a governor, you become a member of the House of Representatives of Senate. And that takes us back 10 years, 15 years ago. If you look at the early days of the post-independence era, you find out that the people were elected based on their integrity. We've been talking about Tafa Balewa and Co. The people of their areas wanted them and they voted them into power. But right now, it is not the case. People go into office not because they are voted by the people. They go into office based on who actually, wanted them to be in office. And at the end of the day, you find out that people will go to National Assembly. They won't even raise their hand one day to make any contribution. They will spend 4 years without even raising a motion or a bill. And the next time you see them, some of them are coming 3 times, 4 times. Why are they coming? If they are doing well, I don't think this is so. We need to look at our electoral laws. Our electoral laws are not encouraging us to have patriotic leaders. It's not allowing us to elect those that we feel that can change this society. Until that is done, we are going to be going back and front as a nation called Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Prestige. Gentlemen, can we also attempt to explain the behavior of members of the political class? Yes, we've talked about the early nationalists and those who were important in the First Republic. We cannot also ignore the intervention of the military. Now, it's been 20 years since the advent of the Fourth Republic. And some scholars have argued, in some cases, that part of what we have seen in the behavior of the political class, now say in the Fourth Republic, is what started out as apprehension over tenure insecurity on account of the previous coups that we had that shunted aside the various republics. So they got in there the first time, some would say not necessarily the first 11 that came in 1999, and they found that the republic could endure, the republic has endured, and now it's also become a trading post, for all kinds of favors and so on and so forth. But we have seen greed as an element in the behavior of the politicians, because they have access to, members of the political class have access to the till which they use for all kinds of purposes. Professor Sam Ego and then Professor Ayede, how do we link all of this up in terms of the behavior of members of our political class and their focus on this software aspect of nation building that ordinarily should conduce to the hardware, which would be the delivery of public goods, what we also refer to as dividends?
I think the first point I would like to make on this is that governance is not about having good people to rule. And we need to learn that lesson. If governance is about having good people to rule, all that will happen is that we'll just look for angels to come and become president, to go into the Senate. Unfortunately, governance is not about who is benevolent, who is nice. It is about making institutions that can enforce accountability work. And so if you have a bad leader, for example, and the institutions are strong, and citizens are strong, they can tame the inclination of that leader, and they can hold that leader to account. So the beauty of democracy is not the ceremony of voting every 4 years. It is what happens in between elections. It is about governance, and it is about a functional legislature that can hold the executive to account. It is about a strong civil society that can set the agenda, ensure transparency in the operation of government, and hold leaders to account. It is about people who genuinely know that they voted for the governor, and therefore they are the custodian of mandates, and using that notion of ownership of that mandate to force him to do their bidding. I think what we have failed to do is to put in place elaborate institutions that work. And that goes to the point made by Honorable Prestige. The Asian Tigers came from a lesson. They learned lessons in their history. Korea, the 1960s, the 70s, putting in place a developmental state. It was a history of failure. And it was an elite that came to the conclusion that let us regulate ourselves and let us give something to the people. If elites in a country don't make that conscious decision to say, look, we have to govern with a vision to the future. And in this governance, with a vision for the future, the people require services. The people require development. And therefore regulate themselves. And that is why the successful nations in the Asian Tigers have put in place elaborate mechanisms of horizontal and vertical accountability, civil society, anti-corruption institutions, and they hold their leaders to account. We need to be able to do that. And I think that is where the sophistry, the bigotry of the ruling elite in this country needs to be exposed, because they amplify our ethnic and regional differences. And what they say is completely, at variance with the reality of daily lives. I have read reports in Jos where there's conflict, in Kano where people think it's Hausa versus Igbo. But on daily basis, Hausa, Igbos connect in business. They advance loan to themselves. They engage in credit system, and they have no problem. Every day in this country, people go to their neighbors who are not necessarily from their ethnic group to take loan, to protect their family. We conduct business across ethnic divides because that is a reality of daily lives. And we need to reinforce that reality, because all these divides are artificial and they are put there to really cause disaffection. And that is why they at least do this, because they don't have anything to offer the people, and they are not willing to offer the
Professor
people anything.
Professor Samego, thanks. Kirian,
Yes.
One point, using the examples of the Asian Tigers, we often refer to the generals who were innovative in South Korea and what Korea eventually became. Why has it been such a challenge for our own elite? In this case, we are talking about a political elite to also come to the realization that, listen, enough. We have to have a country that we can be proud of and a future that we can also be proud of. Yeah. I'd like Professor Ayede to respond to that.
In the same token, he's going to answer that. But I want to add something. Prof talked about that being nice does not necessarily mean that one will be a good leader. But if I understand politics the way it is, that a country moves in a certain direction because of the behavioral pattern of its leaders. Because what the Asian Tigers have cited here is because of the behavior of the leaders, the attitude of the leaders, their value orientation that led to what they have done so far. Right, and also if politics can be defined as an authoritative allocation of scarce resources, then one would be interested in how the leaders
behave. Let's Professor Ayede also take this on along with Kinsley's question.
I think that's very important points I imagine from the discussion so far. The first is that we say institutions are important. The question is, how do we develop strong institutions? And our Professor Egu made a very important point in trying to emphasize the role of the leadership. And that's actually where we have serious problems in Nigeria. For instance, the question of responsibility. Because if you have leadership that is not responsible, and responsibility is a very important political concept, because we are talking about an environment where there's no nation yet, and you are trying to build one. There are no established and firm modern institutions, and you are trying to put them in place. Now, when you have a crop of leadership that puts this institution in place, but are the first to break the rule, they are the first to contravene the regulations, then those regulations cannot be firm, they cannot be meaningful to ordinary citizens. And that's why when we look to the Asian tigers, what we find is that consensus among the elite that this is the limit of the nonsense that we can take. Anything beyond this is unacceptable and will be punished. We have not reached that point yet. Rather, what we have is a situation where the leadership just want to take advantage of their position to pursue very narrow agenda. And sometimes I think we reduce this tendency to our withdrawing to ethnic enclave. It's important for us to have a very critical look at history in trying to address some of these issues. Because when we look at even the concept of ethnic enclave, what you find is not that people actually are promoting their ethnic enclave. They are in fact manipulating those enclaves in order to further their own nest. And you have a situation, for instance, where even at local government elections, you don't see the local people being represented there. Rather, what you find is that elites are using public money to buy votes, to manipulate the electoral process. So you would then ask, what are they really responsible for? Are they responsible to their ethnic group? So that we can say, oh, it is the tension between the pool of national identity and the pool of ethnic identity. That does not appear to be the case to me. Rather, what we have is a situation where even if you put military rule in Nigeria with military rule in South Korea, for instance, you find that there's something missing within the Nigerian situation when compared with the South Korean situation. Because we have a situation where one military rule that tells us that nobody plans a coup for the common good, that you plan a coup for your own purpose. But you don't find those who are in Asia, for instance, saying we plan a coup in order, to satisfy our own private end. So we need to look at this gap of responsibility between what we are experiencing in Nigeria and what we find in other places. In other words, responsibility is very key. You cannot assume position of authority and think that things will transform or services will be delivered without a commitment to delivering those services. And if the leadership does not show any commitment to the common good, how would we expect ordinary to develop that consciousness? What has happened is that people have become cynical, and when the chairman of the local government was talking, saying that they want him to bring money, they want him to be a thief, what he should rather be looking at is the fact that people already think that those who are in authority are thieves in the first place. So they've gone there to further their nest. Rather than wait for any service delivery, which they believe is not coming, they think whatever they can take from them immediately will be sufficient for them to have their own share of the national cake. I think what Samego's argument put on the table is really that the absence of responsibility within the political class, the absence of a strong sense of history, of a commitment to the common good, is something that we need to begin to address. So we need the political class to see this vacuum as something very important if we want to begin to build a nation that will deliver the goods for ordinary Nigerians.
All right, Professor Ayede, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised. Of course, we can reduce our national condition to a number of very visible examples. Talk about infrastructural development, for instance. We're in the rainy season, and we can see how roads have been washed out in the Federation in different parts of the country. Roads are impassable. People are looking for potable water. They are unable to find potable water. And we find Nigerians who are risking their lives, crossing the desert in search of a better life, so-called, in Europe and elsewhere. Nigerians are involved in all kinds of things. Captured simply, it is said that, look, we are a rich country, but poor people. Honorable Candido, let me put it this way, so that you can respond along with your other elected members who are here. It's the political class in general not ashamed by the spectacle of Nigeria in the Community of Nations, that this is how we present ourselves. And yet, we are quick to fly to other places, go and cool off. We ride on their trains, we go to Dubai, we go elsewhere, we see the quality of life elsewhere. Why aren't we able to replicate those things here and then boost our indices of nation building?
Kingsley, I think yesterday I said something, that 59 years after independence, a governor of a state still had the courage to go to a local community, and he's been applauded for commissioning a borehole 59 years after independence. That is expected of a councillor of that particular ward. But because of the way and manner we build our patriotism, we don't even have it. We don't have anything that you can suggest that there's nationalism in us. Senator Abubakar Yusuf mentioned something, and I quite agree with him. He said, when you find, he made an illustration suggesting what Prof said. I can't just remember now, but I'm seriously in agreement with what he said. I can't really recall what he said now, but I think what is most important is that we should see ourselves first as one, if only we have to advance nationhood. I'm from the north, okay? I shouldn't see Nigeria from the context of being a northerner. I should see the country as total, wholesome, and then protect it and secure it as one indivisible nation. Okay? Now, when you have such belief, then you can truly begin to build a better country. Take, for instance, when a minority have the capacity to deliver, but because it doesn't have Godfather, and because the people in the enclave the territory he want to administer leadership is seen from the angle of coming from minority group, he's not given the opportunity to deliver, or he's not even given the opportunity to have a chance to even administer. It means the people are being shortchanged. We sort of allow only people from the majority group of, that territory to be in charge of our administration. Look at Kigali, Rwanda. What that young gentleman is doing is because of patriotism. He's nationalist in nature. He may have come from the minority group of people, but see what he has planted in that country in the last 10 years or so of his time in office. He has built in so much. But because here in this country we attach too much concern to my tribe, where does he come from?
But even that my tribe,
yes.
even that my tribe doesn't have the benefits. I mean, where is that my tribe where you have a standard hospital? I mean, December 31st, 1983, when the Second Republic was overthrown, one of the reasons was hospitals were mere consulting clinics. 36 years later, aren't we having mere consulting clinics all over the place?
Till tomorrow, you will still find consulting clinics.
Gentlemen,
till tomorrow, even in some community, you have a primary school class converted to a clinic.
Yes.
Is that a clinic?
Let's bring in other elected members, because that question from Kingsley is apt. And also
there is no synergy.
Now, we're talking about synergy now. We are talking about deliberate attempts to get something done. For instance, railways. Why should it take us this long to begin to be serious about railway?
I don't want to
and
take
excuse me,
people-
during the Babangida administration, he brought in the Chinese. It didn't work. During Abacha administration, he did the same thing. It didn't work. Then during the after all that, we returned to democracy in 1999. Nothing happened about railway. So what we're talking about is not where you come from. Because if you come from north, south, or west, you have to use rail line to get around. You know, now in Kigali you talked about. Presently, they have the first phone manufacturing factory in Rwanda now. Right, and we've had such factories. You recall the one in Kaduna that was meant to manufacture arms and ammunition for Nigerian army that was later converted to a furniture line. So that's what we're talking about.
Defense industries.
So now, where is where have we? I mean, Gisley said that people travel to Dubai and elsewhere across the globe. Yet when we return here, we don't bother about anything. Political class believes that perhaps we're up there. That is what people will say today, that I'm a professional politician. People who are medical doctors will tell you that they are professional politicians.
Yes, and politician is not a profession.
But
Politics is not a profession.
Let's bring in
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Whenever I travel, I come back, I feel extremely guilty. I feel extremely bad for what has happened. But we have to remember that civil servants in this country are politicians. They are more political than politicians. I tell you this. And until we begin to address the issue that this politics thing is not tied to the person that has just gone into election, it is beyond that. I think the political scientists, they say pervasiveness of politics. This thing is so perverse that even the civil servants are more political than the politicians. So they are the agents to which political leaders use. But there is a disconnect. Babangida said one thing. He said we have everything for our needs, but we don't have things for our greed. You raise the issue of greed, and it is a very, very fundamental issue. Why should we be greedy? What is it that we are denied? That I want to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate at the expense of the other members of the community. Now, you also talk about the inroad of military into this country. The political scientists will talk about the APTA principle. The independent variable, the dependent variable, and the intervening variable. For me, yes, the military came in, but they didn't come in, prepared to build a nation. They came in to build their own individual selves, and that has been translated up till today. Today, the institutions, the political institutions that have come up, for uniting this country, there is none better than the National Assembly. But are we really in the National Assembly? As for instance, me, am I just senator of the North, or senator or Fulani, or senator of a Muslim? No. Until we begin to look ourselves as, senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The document said senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We make good laws for the federal, but when it comes to practice, there is manipulation of the laws that we have done. I give a typical example. Exchange rate today is a fundamental issue. And up till now, the monetary policy, the manipulators or the practitioners of that do not see it as instrument of national unity. They see it as a micro aspect of it. But in the final analysis, it ought to be an economic index or economic tool for uniting this country. That is why we have a Bureau de Change. So in every association in this country, sir, there is this issue of politicking there. I want this leadership because, I'm from the North. I want this leadership because I'm from the South. Today, Obasanjo tried to do something which I really, really believe in what he has done. To bring a minority to rule this country it was based on what? On resource control. If not because of the resource control, there is no way a minority will come up to rule this country. But we have to we have to go outside this issue of it is the resources that determine my own power to come to the center and rule. Whether you have resources or you don't have resources, it is your credibility, your integrity, your ability to link up with one another is that matters. So I think, we feel so bad. I feel so bad whenever I come back. The moment I land at the airport, I see, our, what do you call that thing that moves the rollers. I feel so bad. I went to China. China said, look, don't give me dollar in the hotel. They refused to collect it. Today in this country, primary school teachers, they say, primary schools, they say pay in dollar, they accept. So I don't know how we can go around this issue. It's a big issue. Go to hotel. Today hotels are dealers in foreign exchange. I've not seen, why should. So it is not just the political class, even the economic class, we have to find the way to match and build a nation around
Senator,
the economy.
yes, we are running out of time, really. You were talking about dollars. What about the CEOs, DGs of government agencies and parastatals? They're also using dollars. Right, so it has always been there. And, of course, as you rightly pointed out, it calls for questioning, and this attitude must change. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and we are talking about nation building and, of course, the role of the political class. Stay with us. Thank you for also staying with us, and we'll be right back. When we get back, we will continue with the conversation. Stay with us.
Don't you people sell imported materials here? Welcome, as beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, we, of course, have a number of tweets that have come in from our viewers. We're going to take those tweets very quickly and then return to our guest. Prince Vicade says, nation building involves more than informal structure, but laying a good foundation for the growth and development of all sectors, be it education, health, judiciary, security, housing, employment, and others.
All right, Sani Michael or Makoji, if we are serious about nation building, the campaign should not end in the media. Thus, our views and comments here should be compiled to serve as opinion poll to our leaders. Well, we can be talking this topic every now and then without proactive measures. Thanks to NTA for doing its bit.
Now, Chris Simeon tweets, now the way things are going on in this country indicates that the political class has failed to play its role. It's high time the political class woke up to play its part and let the people feel the impact.
Ibrahim Tudu, most of our leaders have taken the nation as and subjects for granted for too long. Nation building has taken a backseat and giving way to divisiveness, courtesy of religion, ethnicity, and regionalism. Nigeria has suffered too much for too long. At the moment, little percentage of the political class are interested in nation building, while others are supporting national efforts. Some are not. Some of them care only when it's their time or government. Some are in outright antagonism to statesmen and national development.
Murtala Aliyu Jabo tweets, in my opinion, the political class is the cause of our current political crisis and social unrest. This is because the Constitution favored them and they are not willing to give room for amendments, but they should be extra careful in the end because their children will pay the price.
Abdul says nation building is the responsibility of every Nigerian. We must eschew bitterness and rancorous rivalry among ourselves. The political class must make sacrifices and be focused. They must shun corrupt practices.
Dele Jack Solomon, now bring a crucial factor in the realization of the manifest destiny of any society. It is expected that the political class will be vibrant, dynamic, and visionary, as well as have the passion to change things for the better through good governance and welfareism. Now, by virtue of their calling, the political class is expected to show leadership and live up to their promises. Unfortunately, they haven't lived up to the expectation.
Yes, Francis will be. The political class understands the Nigerian populace so well and can manipulate them however they like. Nigeria should eschew tribe in governance and take everyone as one, as enshrined in our anthem. Though tribe and tongue may differ, Nigeria, our sovereign land, where no man will be oppressed.
Among Bola Humbabs, now the nation building Nigeria's political class wants to pursue must be that which promotes an egalitarian society. Nation building must ensure everybody is treated as somebody, and that we must promote a country where the son of a nobody becomes somebody without knowing anybody.
Utulo Sunday, the Nigerian political class should know that there will be no more for them as long as the masses are still being treated as second-class citizens in their own country. They should provide basic amenities for us.
Law Alpha said the political class is the engine room for all-round development in all climes, except Nigeria, where they continue to manipulate the people for their unending selfish aggrandizement.
PST Mani Aban, the political class must lead by example. They must stop promoting sectional interests, eschew greed, patronize our healthcare facilities and locally made products, and send their children to our schools. That is when others will follow. We want to see change to begin with them.
Now, Abbas Abubakar tweets, says, our leaders failed to build on the foundation laid by our heroes. That's why today we don't enjoy relative peace and stability. Our major problem is leadership.
Ishak Abdullahi, attitudinal change by the political class towards patriotism, national unity and development will change the present narratives. Lack of consistency in policy implementation and political commitment to national building by our leaders have hindered Nigeria's development since independence.
Badamasi Adamu tweets, says nation building is about cooperation in both political, economic, as well as socio-cultural spheres of a country, where the citizenry look beyond their heterogeneous nature, and of course our political class today have used this in a negative way against our interests.
Now, Otunse says, and very important too, the discussion of political class should focus on reducing costs now. National and state assemblies should cut their costs by half. They should carry out oversight with integrity. Operating expenditures are outrageous.
Now, Akewula Bello, let's not make things look like Asian tigers got to where they are today without sacrifice. It took Lee Kuan Yew over 30 years with autocratic power to reset their system. The elite will never come together because of interest.
Now, Josh, I totally support the views of Honorable Prestige, but what is he doing to change the current narratives? Our biggest challenge is the political class.
Prestige. I mean, in addition to that, you know, I posed the question a bit earlier, and then Honorable Candido took that part, and then coming on to Senator Yusuf. And it's just to ask whether the political class doesn't feel concerned that we are the way we are. Looking again, what you can broadly refer to as the software of nation building or the hardware, which are the public goods. There are many examples. Health. I mean, we ought now to be ashamed of ourselves that for every minor ailment, people are being flown abroad. And of course, in some cases, they also return in coffins, you know. What is it? When will the political class come to that realization to say, look, we have to take charge of ourselves, take charge of our country, and be sure that we actually have a place in the sun where we all can be proud of this country. We hear of politician summits every time. They are talking about election, election, election. But in the end, what happens to our nation, our growth and our development arising from political leadership and therefore the political elite?
The same issue has been recurring, and I want to also say that we, the political elites, are to be blamed. I will keep emphasizing it. And I made a little reference to how we even emerge. Who are even the political class? That is even the question. How did they become the political class? Were they chosen by the people, or were they forced on us by a certain group of people? When people talk about ethnicity and all that, yes, we call ourselves the politicians. We are the people who are fanning these embers of discord among the various sub-nationalities. We, the politicians. If you go to the north, you see a lot of other people like Igbos, like the Prof said, having a good time with their, their fellow northerners. You go to the west, the same thing. But when it comes to election, that is where you will now know that this man is not from the north. But he has lived here for about 20, 30 years. His children, all the children were born there. That is when you will now know that, oh, his name is Aliyu. So there's no way he could be this. Even when he comes from the north, maybe from Adamawa end, and he lives in Kano, that's when you now know that he lives in Kano. He's from Adamawa, not even a Kano man. And all that. So we, the politicians, we create this for our own selfish and individual greed. To satisfy our individual greed.
How do we overcome this?
How we overcome this, like I said earlier on, is to talk about how we emerge as leaders. How do we emerge as leaders is very, very important. I will play it on the Mr. President to please sign the Electoral Act as amended. That will surely give us another point where we can now elect leaders that could be accountable to the people. Prof made very valid points here about the responsibility of we, the leaders. If we don't have leaders that are accountable to the people, there's no way you can get the best from them. If you have leaders that are just there because of, to satisfy their paymasters, their godfathers, the people that brought them, they are the people that you should be accountable to. I was elected by my people. So everything I think about my life today is how to satisfy our people. In every issue that comes up, my interest is how do I satisfy those that elected me into office. I'm accountable to them. I go every quarter to give them the account of what I've done in National Assembly. And if there is any constituency project, I'll go back and tell them I have this constituency project. This is the company that is, is handling it. So if he did not do well, please hold him responsible. So what I'm saying is that it is important, very, very important, that we elect leaders and not allowing people to appoint people who are going to superintend over our developmental projects and ourselves. If that is not done, we will not get it right. But at the moment, Prof talked about the institutions. These institutions are very, very important. If we live here, we are all lawless. But when we go to America, we are law abiding. Even on a queue, you will see a minister, you see a governor carrying his bag, queuing. But here, you see him on the traffic, he will be there until the red light is off. But here, once you're a minister or a governor or anybody, even your dispatch riders will even go and contravene the traffic. So what I'm just saying is that these institutions must be strengthened where nobody will be above the law. If I am a member of the House of Reps and I commit an offense, I should be punished based on the law, irrespective of where I come from. But the institution where these institutions are not strong enough to punish corporates, to bring to book those who go contrary to the laws of the land, we will not make any headway. So all our efforts should be towards having strong
okay.
institutions,
Well,
you know, especially in the anti-corruption area, where most of these infringements are, you know, are a daily occurrence.
You have indeed made a very valid point. But what many Nigerians would think is beyond all of this is the fact that wherever you come from, however you are elected, there should be this Nigerianism in you that, for instance, we should be able to have railways, that we should be able to have, you know, a constant power supply. We're talking beyond where you come from now, but we're talking about building Nigeria as a nation where infrastructure could be available to service, you know, the nation. Anyway, let's go to Professor Ayede once more. There's one thing that is missing in all our development strata, and that is science, technology, and innovation. That is lacking. And there's no nation that has ever risen globally without indigenous science and technology development. It has never happened anywhere in the world, but I don't know how it's going to happen in this part of the world. Now, if you look at everything that we go after across the globe, it is science and technology driven. But locally here, well, even in the budget rating, we have not recognized that science and technology is a way to go by. What is your view here, and what can be done to reverse the trend? Briefly, please.
I think the most fundamental aspect of science and technology and the whole idea of innovation is really that we don't even value innovation. You can look at the universities, for instance, and ask the vice chancellors to what extent do they employ the human skills and resources available in their engineering or technology faculties to solve infrastructural problem within the university. You'll find that that's very limited. So what we're saying is that if we don't have regard for innovation, if we don't put our engineers to task, how can they innovate? How can we know exactly their strength and what value added we need to do in order to promote not just engineering and technology education, but also innovation within that sector? I think we displace our goals. So what every people in authority, most people with very few exceptions think is that power is sufficient. It's an end in itself. That once you occupy any position of authority, it's your time for you to begin to enjoy the good things of life, rather than looking at it as a means towards achieving national objectives. And if we don't have that commitment to achieving goals, then the element that will drive those goals will be neglected. And that's why technology, science, and innovation do not take the front seat in our engagement with human capacity development or human resource development. And we think all of this behavior, all of this orientation, we need to change. We need to begin to put national goals, we need to put service delivery, we need to put infrastructure in front of us all the time so that we can pay attention to the know-how that we need to acquire in order to begin to deal with all of these problems. And I can tell you that Nigerians are sufficiently gifted, they are sufficiently endowed to be able to rise up to the occasion. And you can look at what Nigerians are doing all over the world to demonstrate to you that in terms of science and innovation, if we really commit to using it to drive our national objectives, definitely Nigerians will rise up to the occasion.
All right, Professor Ayede, thank you very much. Let's come back to Abuja. Professor Sam Egu, very briefly, you talked earlier about strong citizens and strong institutions as a bulwark to ensure that the political class can deliver on the mandate, even though they are not necessarily, or they shouldn't necessarily be angels. But how then do you deal with our present reality, which is the capture of citizens by the political class and the capture of institutions by the same political class? The capture has weakened the citizens, the capture has weakened the institutions. A simple illustration of citizen capture, what Honorable Abdullahi Candido was saying. People mill around his offices, and if he's so minded and he gives out the freebies, well, of course, they would have fallen for him. And then, of course, we see how institutions are manipulated to serve the ends of the political class. How then might the Nigerian state recapture these institutions and citizens for the benefit of all?
Very simple. I think all of us have agreed that as sophisticated as they claim, members of the political class cannot even do the simple thing of cutting and pasting. They travel elsewhere. But to cut and paste this, they can't simply do it. This is the simplest operation, in terms of a computer language. Now, proceeding from there, what are institutions? Institutions are partly about people, about rules, about roles that we play, and respecting the ground norm. This is simply what institutions, describe. So, all we therefore need to do, as Honorable said, I'm a member of the House of Rep. If I contravene, if I engage in any infraction, punish me according to the law of the land. And because we have not been able to develop strong institutions, which is deliberate, because we manipulate these institutions. At this point is, we set the rule, and we are the first to break. And many people do not know the sense of anger out there, particularly among the youth. I encounter them every day. They are asking me, help me to get a job. I don't have the power. And the sense of helplessness, weighs me down. And yet they are saying that I would have gotten a job if I knew a senator. I would have gotten a job if I knew a minister. Oh, the people from this place, they are the ones I think we really need, as a matter of urgency and as a matter of enlightened self-interest, to put in place institutions and allow the rules to work. Because our collective interest and our future depends on that. If we don't do that, we are sitting on gunpowder. It will explode and consume all of us.
Gentlemen, it would have been nice, if we had more time on this. And at this point, I would like to thank all of you for being part of this very, very interesting conversation this morning on nation building and the role of political class in engineering progress for a nation such as Nigeria. First of all, Senator Abubakar Yusuf, Senator representing Taraba Central, we thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Chinedu Prestige, you have been so frank in your deliberations this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
And Professor Sam Egu, of course, always there for us when it comes to political analysis.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, and Abdullah Hademo Candido is always candid with what he submits here. He's the chairman, Abuja Municipal Area Council of the FCT.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure hosting you once more.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And then, Ibadan Studio Professor Emmanuel Remy Ayede. Professor, thank you so much for sharing your time and your thoughts with us this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Right now, let's take you on sports.